Hi, this is Dr. Joel Schultz. I'm with the National Center for Police Advocacy and also a columnist for Police One at the National Police Association, and have tried to be an advocate for wounded officers along with a variety of other organizations around the country. And a few years ago, do you remember what the year was, Jennifer?
I believe it was in 17.
Okay. Was participating in as chaplain for a retreat for wounded officers and their spouses. And Jennifer and Roger, her husband, were there, and a very compelling story. And I'm just going to, first of all, I want to start out by saying a little bit about Jennifer. She has had some major challenges in dealing with Roger's injuries and TBI and PTSD after an assault at the prison where he was working. And we'll have that story told pretty soon. But the focus of today's interview is to just let people know. I'm not sure that we're going to be able to solve Roger and Jennifer's challenges. But the purpose of the interview is to let people know the tremendous barricades that are in place between a wounded officer and getting the right kind of care. So in to start that discussion, I want to tell you a little bit about what I know about Jennifer. Jennifer is not a whiner. She has endured much, and she has been able to, in the midst of all of that, make the decision to come forward with her story in a more public way, and to see what kind of resources there might be out there. She is no slacker. She's been in the corrections world for how long?
18 years this year.
Okay, so we round that up to 20, and you're now with the Federal Bureau of Prisons. You are a cancer survivor.
I am.
You are a tornado survivor.
Yes.
You have you completed your graduate studies?
I have one class left this fall, and I will have my intelligence master's.
Okay, from Citadel?
The Citadel Military College.
Right. So when people hear you tell your story, I just want them to know what a warrior you are. And you are used to problem solving, meeting challenges head on, grabbing life by the cojones and moving ahead. And so I know that this is a next step and probably somewhat challenging for you to reach out of yourself, because your fountain of enthusiasm and capacity is certainly um, certainly running low, I would guess. You
is.
also, I think you run a little side business as well, or have?
I have several. We have the farm, and then I do skincare, and I also do consultant business for gangs and gang intelligence. So busy.
Yeah, I forgot about your involvement in, I started saying involvement in gangs and involvement in gang intelligence. So I just want people to know that you are not a whiner. You're not a complainer. You are not somebody who is a woe is me, I need sympathy kind of person. You are a person of action, and this is part of problem solving with this challenge with Roger. So we can get into the story of Roger's background and injury, but just tell me what you're facing right now. What is life like for you and Roger and your kids in this season within the last week or month or so?
The last month, Roger threatened to kill me and his kids, who he loves dearly. It's like a light switch situation. It never happened. We never had violence in our family before. And then he wanted us dead. He couldn't get us, so he came home and tried to kill himself. He swallowed, to my best estimate, after finding all the pills and cleaning up the house this week, 65 Oxycontin.
Hmm.
And he's been in the mental hospital for 1 full month and 1 week. Tuesday will be a week tomorrow. And the issues that I have right now are trying to get him adequate mental health care for the PTSD and his suicide attempt, as well as, the homicidal stuff too.
So
He
is
has
that happening? And if not, why not?
he has VA benefits that he has service-connected PTSD with, also in relation to the law enforcement side of his PTSD. The issue remains that, according to his VA director here in Mississippi, their definition of an active PTSD crisis is when he is a harm to himself or someone else immediately, right then. If it's after the fact, like we are now, but it hasn't been treated, then it's not considered an active problem, and they're not worried about getting him adequate inpatient treatment. So now they're just going to open the door tomorrow morning. They're going to recommend that he goes to an outpatient volunteer program that's residential, but he could walk away, or he could not engage in the treatment program at all and just continue on this downward spiral.
So tell us how, as one of the manifestations of PTSD and his cognitive impairment from his attack, which again, we want to hear that story. How has that impacted how his condition gets reported to his caregivers, and how that has been an impediment for you to get him the kind of care that you are convinced that he needs?
He's been dealing with the VA specifically for about 5 years now, maybe 6, I think. And basically, since COVID changed everything, he does telemed. So he dials in, they have a little chat like we're doing now with the Zoom, and then he gets his refill for 3 months and he's on his way. The problem that I have is, over the last 2 years, Roger has progressively gotten worse. He's had some very serious steps of escalation as we go, but they've been so small and over that 2-year period that nobody saw it. And he wasn't telling his doctors about it. When I called and talked to his team 2 months ago, when we first started having serious issues, life-threatening issues, they didn't know anything about his escalation. He would just call and say, life is great, pills are working, everything's fine, and he would hang up and they'd send him refills in the mail.
So am I correct in saying that so far his treatment plan has been based on his self-reporting?
It is.
Well, as you know, I'm not a licensed counselor or a psychiatric professional, but it seems like that would not be a terribly unusual pattern for a person to be either simply not self-aware of the intensity of their problem, or to be in denial, or to have some type of embarrassment about being truthful about it, or having been an independent, strong person at one time, just not wanting to admit that there's a weakness and problem there. Did any of those scenarios hit ring true for you?
Absolutely. He has always been one to solve his own problems, never rely on anybody else. The issue comes in where he has this traumatic brain injury in addition to the PTSD. So he will go off the deep end. I can talk him down for the most part, except for the last 2 episodes. Get him back to earth and refocused, and we go back to normal life and everything's great. But he forgets what he said. He forgets what he did during those really bad PTSD breaks. and it's almost like he blacks out. So he has no memory of what he said or did. As a spouse, you never get that, I'm sorry, I didn't mean all those hateful things that I said. And then in addition to that, when he goes to his therapy sessions, he doesn't remember any of the stuff that happened or what he did, so he never tells them.
And have you been able to have access to his diagnostic records and treatment records? You'd think you would as a spouse.
At one point, I was involved in the therapy sessions, and I was there with him during the sessions because of the traumatic brain injury. He doesn't remember a lot of the medications that he takes. He doesn't remember the treatments. And at the very same time, he's lost most of his life memories. He knows we're married. He doesn't remember the day. Yeah. He knows that he was in the army, but he doesn't remember a lot of that either. He only remembers small parts of it. So big chunks of his life is missing. And because I was his best friend for almost 5 years before we got married, I heard a lot of the stories. So I knew a lot of the stories before the riot happened. And when that happened, all of that was gone. He couldn't even remember how to make his coffee in the morning or where he lives. He still doesn't know where he lives. So I was there as a memory for him to guide him in the therapy sessions and help the doctors figure out what it is that has maybe caused the triggers for the PTSD. But after a while, he just pushed me away and wouldn't let me come to the sessions anymore, which is fine if he's dealing with some internal things and he's not ready to communicate those issues yet. But eventually it just became that I wasn't welcome. And now, outside of calling the VA crisis hotline, which they are incredible people and an enormous resource for families and veterans, I called them. Outside of calling them, I haven't been able to get a hold of anybody who's been able to help us or give me guidance on what the next step should be for him.
So let's tell that story. First of all, Roger's a veteran. He was a medic, right, in the military, and had an event that resulted in a non-combat event that resulted in a diagnosis of PTSD, and had some apparently not terribly productive interaction with VA in treating that, if I remember your telling me that. Interestingly, you know, a lot of people, when they think PTSD, boom, 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 you're just you're not worth anything. But Roger moved into a very responsible position. You said he was on the verge of a promotion in the institution where he was working.
Yes.
And then had a whole new set of experiences that regardless of the history of PTSD, would have been a PTSD moment. So let's go ahead and hear that story. How was Roger attacked? You said you mentioned that he took an overdose of oxy. And when we hear this story, we'll understand why he had that prescription medication available. So I'll let you tell that story in as much detail or condensation as you want. But it's a horrific story. And before you tell that story, I just want to say that I've met Roger. You know, we spent the week together with some other couples. Just a life-changing experience for me. And he's such a nice guy. Such a nice guy. Really got to enjoy him. You could tell that he had some cognitive impairment. He had some mobility issues. He was eventually, you know, much to his resistance and I think even shame, he finally got the scooter thing so that he could move around a little bit better. And one of the stories that I tell about the many acts of courage that I have been exposed to in working with wounded officers and their spouses is you know, obviously with his PTSD, I saw him, we were on the same flight out of Billings, Montana, which is close to the retreat area near Yellowstone. And I I knew that he was really struggling just to walk down the aisle to take a seat in that big can. Now, I'm a little claustrophobic, but I don't have PTSD as far as I know, and I can talk myself through it and breathe myself through it. But to see him go down the aisle, and what effort it must have been for him to have that whole retreat experience, as great as it was for everybody. He also told me about a spiritual renewal that he had after his attack, and made the statement. He said, if that's what it took for me to have a deeper understanding of God, then I would go through that again. And that really moved me. So I love Roger, and I want people to know how great a guy he is, and so how far he has fallen, and what a tremendous toll this injury has taken on his mind and body and spirit. So what happened that day that caused him to be where he is today?
Right. So I will touch on that story about getting on the plane too. So one thing you didn't know, and a lot of people didn't know, was he was dealing with his own PTSD, being in that cramped area with all these tiny little aisles and seats, and all these people touching him and being close. He has a thing, you don't touch him, period. Um, he was dealing with his own PTSD and his own issues, but I have a severe fear of flying. So I
Oh,
was coming completely apart and he was keeping me together. So
oh, wow.
he put all his stuff to the side to get me through the flights. So that just speaks to who he is. He puts everything to the end for himself, and he takes care of everybody else before himself, even when he's the one that really needs it. So
Well, it's
yeah.
a testimony to the courage of both of you and the persistence that you have continued to walk through this journey. So, and when people hear the story about his attack, they'll understand why being touched and being in a confined space is pretty traumatic.
Yeah, so we reported to duty. We worked life and death. Our facility was maximum male security facility for inmates who were never going home. In that state, life was 999 years, and we had death row for the state. He worked lockup in death row most of the time. At the time of this incident, he was in what we called mini max. We had run out of lockup space for all of our guys who nobody else in the state could control. So we got all the violent offenders and all the sexual offenders that no other facility could physically control because they were so violent.
So the worst of the worst in Mississippi was where you
In
guys,
South Carolina. Yep, South Carolina.
or South Carolina, I'm sorry.
Yep. And I'm crying, I'm sorry. But
You
so
go ahead. A lot of us will be crying at the end of this.
So we had 1,800 inmates that night and 68 death row. He was in mini max, and that unit was known for murder. They were going to kill everybody who came in the door, officers, inmates. They didn't care. It was something else for them to do. So he had a spidey sense, that gut instinct that we all officers get. Something's not quite right. Something's getting ready to happen. The hair on the back of your neck stands up. You get those goosebumps. He called the captain about 45 minutes before anything happened. And he said, "Hey, we got to shut this down. We got to lock it up. Something bad's getting ready to happen. Just got a feeling." Captain said, "Yeah, you're just being overreactive. You're being paranoid. We're not worried about it. And just chill out, dude. You're fine."
Let me just interject a little bit about one of the unique things about your and Roger's experience with working with wounded officers is you came out of corrections, and sad to say, in many ways, corrections is a stepchild of the law enforcement umbrella. And if you have not worked in a corrections environment, and I can't say that I have, I love getting out if I have to go in.
Me too.
But this but the skill level and the human relations skills and insight that you have to have, we cops, I say we have been retired, but we cops have that. Sometimes we have that spidey sense too. But when you're working in an institution, and correct me if I'm wrong, there are, I don't know whether it's the air pressure or vibrations or just the energy of
Absolutely.
people, or this
You can
animal
feel it.
stuff.
It's
So
like electricity. You can smell
yeah,
it. It's
you
on the
guys, it's for you
walls.
guys, it's
As soon as
palpable and
you
you
walk in
have
the
to pay
door,
attention to it.
yeah, as soon as you walk in the door, you can feel it. It's like an electricity. A lot of times you can hear it. It's either going to be really, really loud and it's normally not, or it's going to be dead silent and you can hear everything. And it's just eerie when it happens. And you just get that gut instinct, and there's no other way to explain it. It's your gut, and it's always right.
So what should have happened? And so I'm not to push your story, but Roger actually reported this, right?
He did. Yeah, they should have sent the other lieutenants. Each unit has a lieutenant. They should have sent each lieutenant down there. So we would have had 5 plus the captain. They should have locked the unit down, and the inmates would have been behind their closed doors. And that would have been the end of the night. It would have been lights out, have a great night. And then we do counting rounds and make sure everybody's still safe. But they should have been locked in their units and in their cells, and no more movement ultimately.
Okay, so that was error number one.
Yes. And then pill line went out. So they have to walk down. They tell you that you get 23 and 1, so you're locked down for 23 hours and then you get 1 hour of rec. But South Carolina does a really great job with their controlled movement. They build that 1 hour into your daily movements. So going to chow 3 times a day, going to get your medication 3 times a day, that's your hour. And they built it in, so they're covered and they can keep you locked down otherwise. Everybody went to pill line to get their medication. Roger was training a rookie and had been training him for probably 3 or 4 months. We stay on probation and we stay with a field training officer. Roger was the field training officer for a year. And this rookie had an axe to grind. He was out to make life hell for these inmates and harass them and just rub salt in their wounds. They're already in the worst situation they could ever be in. It's not getting any better, but he made it worse. And one inmate came to the door and said, "Hey, boss, I missed the call for medication." And he was a known psych patient. Everybody on the yard knew if he didn't take his meds, we were going to have a problem. It was going to be a huge fight. Somebody was going to get stabbed. It was going to be bad. He slammed the door in his face and he said, "You're not going to get your meds." And he shut the door and locked it. But the problem with that is you have 168 inmates walking back to the unit, and you're going to have to open the door. So he just sat and waited. That's all these inmates have is time. They're going to sit, they're going to wait, they're going to get theirs. And that's what happened. As soon as he opened the door, this inmate popped the rookie in the eye socket. He actually broke the eye socket and his cheekbone. And then it set off like a bomb. You had a Sally port area that is the intermediate between the 2 sides. You have an A side and a B side, and the Sally port's in the middle. And it was a 10 by 10 room probably. And to Roger's best estimate, he had 50 inmates and they were all chest to chest in there. And they were just beating him and the rookie to death. They were going to kill him. They'd been telling the rookie for about 2 months that they were going to kill him. They actually had a verified bounty on his head. They wanted him dead. They told him every day, "You're going to come to work, we're going to kill you, and you're never going to leave." And they meant it. These guys are the worst that you could ever deal with. And they tried. They did. Roger called for first responders, and I heard the call go out. I was in another control room on the opposite side of the facility. And usually when that happens, then the control room operator will call out the incident and where it's at, and we'll have first responders run in. The call didn't go out. I waited. I called the control room probably 3 times, I think, maybe 4. And she finally answered the phone. She was really ugly and she's screaming at me, "I'm on the phone, my friend. What do you want?" I said, "There's a fight in the unit. You need to call first responders. If you don't, I'm going to report you." And
So you're
she
hearing
got,
you're hearing Roger's call for assistance.
I barely heard the call. He was on the radio. We all know steel, glass, and concrete, it messes with the airwaves with the radios, and the radios are not great to begin with. All you could hear was fight in, I'm not going to say the unit name, but it was part of the name. It was only part. And I knew exactly where he was. So all you could hear was fight. And the radio went dead. You couldn't hear anything else. He wasn't answering the radio. Several people tried to call because they knew who it was, and they weren't responding. So she finally called out the fight. It took time for them to get there. It's a good 1.5 mile run from death row to the unit that he was in.
Oh,
And yeah, and you got to go through secured doors. You have to go through locks and gates, and you have to lock the gates behind you. And you don't control the doors that you go through. Somebody else controls them. So they have to push the button and let you through. Then the other door has to close, and then you have to open the other door. So it's not just running down the hallway to the rescue. There's a whole lot of barriers to get through to get there. So it takes
so
time.
do you have dispatch records of how long that took between the time that the call finally went out to the time that help arrived?
They
Or can
don't
you
keep,
estimate it? So I guess if you're
um,
working there, you know
yes,
how
we
long
are
it's going to
told,
take.
right, when we're training at that specific facility, we're told we need to fight for our life for 15 minutes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So for 15 minutes, he was probably chest to chest, fighting, punching. And he told me one of our guys, his nickname was Shaq because he was huge, picked him up, threw him over the crowd into a wall. When he hit the wall, he hit the floor. Then they started stomping him. And he grabbed one inmate that was sitting on top of him and pulled him down and used him like a body shield. And so the inmate was getting most of the blows at this point, but he held on to him until everything was over. When everything was over, he stood up and he handcuffed that one inmate and took that one inmate to lockup. And that was the
Roger
one
did that?
inmate Roger did.
When
And
we
that
hear
was
about his injuries, that's going to sound amazing.
it does. And so that one inmate out of what he says was probably 50 is the one that was charged with assault on law enforcement, because we were law enforcement officers for the state. We weren't just jailers, certified state law enforcement. So they arrested him and sent him to lock up and charged him criminally with it, in addition to his other charges he already was convicted of. He went to medical because we are a 24-hour medical facility, because we're not sending death row to the emergency room for, a broken arm. We're going to fix them ourselves. And
So Roger
they were,
went to medical?
yeah, and they refused to give him first aid. He had a boot print that was on his face for 3 weeks. They didn't give him any first aid at all. He's bleeding. His glasses are broken. It's remarkable that after everything, it was remarkable he even got up and walked out on his own. But they refused to give him any treatment because they needed to get blood samples, hair samples, and a breathalyzer to make sure he wasn't drunk or high on duty when this happened. Because a riot's your fault, not the inmates, apparently. So after everything, they
Let
gave
me
him a
just
little bit.
I'll make another insertion here. If you're working in this business, you need to know what the policies are when something bad happens to you and you become a suspect. They've got to rule out your responsibility.
And I will tell
And
you,
that takes some
hindsight,
time, and you need to be careful about representation. You know you're compelled to do it. You don't have your Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination unless you want to walk free away from the job right then. So people just need to know that. I'm not saying it's necessarily a bad policy, unless you're putting that as a priority against actually getting treatment. So we had the ignoring the warnings about the thing. You had a delay, an unforgivable delay in getting a response to Roger's call for help. And then you've got I just that lack of first aid and medical treatment just floors me. I just don't get it.
and on that note, talking about your rights and knowing your policies, one of the policies that we didn't know anything about. And it wasn't until 11 years later when we were fighting workers' comp and even going through the PSOB process later, drug test and alcohol. When they do the drug test and alcohol in that system, in that specific state, unless it's a positive result, they don't keep records. You have to have those records.
Oh,
If you are going to have a lifetime disability and you're injured in the line of duty, get the negative result tests and put them away in a binder forever and a day, because you're going to need them later. Even if it's policy not to get it, insist. Because we had to go through the governor's office, and it wasn't until somebody accidentally slipped the governor's cell phone number to us that we finally got what we needed, and that was that he overrode that policy specifically for him to get his medical rights.
so just again, we'll take a little side trick here, Trip. Would you recommend an independent medical evaluation, even if it's out of pocket cost?
Absolutely, 100%. And we're pretty much at that point in the story. After he got medical treatment at the clinic in our facility, they sent him by state agency vehicle to the local emergency room. And when he got there, he's in uniform, he's covered in blood, his face is swollen. They initially thought that his jaw was broken. It was not. It was just really bad, bruised and swollen from all the stomping. Oh, we don't have prisons here. Yes, you do. It's 15 minutes down the road. No, we don't have prisons here. Yes, you do.
So, well, who
They thought
cares? You're hurt.
they treated him like a drug seeker.
Wow.
They gave him ice and ibuprofen after he had his head stomped, and he's bleeding and he's bruised and he can barely move and he has no idea what's going on. And I think the most bitter part of this for me, even though I get it because I was there too, we were part of the same agency, they dropped him off on the curb and left. Nobody stayed with him. Literally dropped him off at the little, automatic doors that open up, left him on the curb, have a great day, and left. I picked him up from the emergency room myself the next morning. Nobody stayed with him. Nobody made sure he was okay.
Wow. All right,
Yeah.
so I'm at number 4, an incompetent ER response. And number 5, a total lack of peer support from the get-go, right?
Yes. Even the next day, nobody from the facility called him to check on him. Our brothers in blue, we were a real true blue family. We were at each other's kids' baptisms and wedding anniversaries and birthday parties. We were at each other's house every single weekend. We were off together. All of us, we were a tight-knit crew. Nobody called him. Nobody checked on him. He didn't get a card from the warden, get well soon, nothing. Nobody followed up.
So when did he finally get a diagnosis of his actual injuries from that day?
4 months later. For 4 months, I took him back and forth to, the doc in the box, the urgent care community clinics, our emergency rooms. He had severe headaches to the point where we found out later that they're actually called suicide headaches, because most people kill themselves because it's so painful and there's nothing to make it go away. But severe headaches, pain, confusion. He didn't know where he was. He didn't know what he was doing. He couldn't remember massive times and space. He forgot how to make his coffee. For a 38-year-old man who's been drinking coffee since he was 16, he didn't know how to make his own cup of coffee. He would go
That'd be a
through
crisis point in my life for sure.
Mine too. He would go through a whole pot of coffee, tasting it and dumping it out because it wasn't right, because he couldn't remember. And then the next day, the very same thing, because he couldn't remember how to do it. So there's a lot of cognitive issues right away.
So at
And
what
I
point
knew
did he get a scan or an X-ray or an MRI or a CT or something?
we got a secret squirrel phone call from somebody, and we'll never reveal who it was, but they were higher up in the agency, and they called him because they do care about him and love him. And they told him, this phone call never happened. Go get a lawyer tomorrow morning. You're gonna have to fight because they're not gonna give you what you need. So we did. We spent Valentine's Day in the lawyer's office, signing paperwork, paying retainer fees, and he paid for Roger to go to his doctors. We went to an orthopedic and we went to a forensic psychologist. 4 months after the fact is when we found out he had two places in his neck that are broken, healed and incorrectly and were never treated, a place in his low back that was broken and healed incorrectly and never treated. And then the forensic psychiatrist did a cognitive mapping. So we spent a whole week testing, doing all of these great little mind tests and ink blot things and math and patterns and everything. And we found out after the testing, he was 2 points below what the state legally determines to be mentally retarded.
Wow.
2 points below. For a man who was a FTO, he was in the service, he had remarkable grades in the service, and now he's 2 points below legally retarded. 1 year later, we went back for that testing, and he was 3 points above. And they told us that that was it. That's all he was going to get as far as mental recovery for his brain injury. They told us his brain was so bad and so swollen that it really should have been packed in ice, his whole head, and he should have had hourly scans to watch the swelling, and he should have possibly had surgery to relieve the pressure, and he wouldn't have had nearly as many cognitive issues as he does today. But they didn't even give him a CT scan or anything after his entire body was beat and nearly crushed.
You know, and again, I'm not a medical doctor, but you know, when you come in for treatment, whether it's for psychological treatment or for physical treatment, they talk about the presenting problem. What's the presenting problem?
Yeah.
And then you ask questions about, you know, whether the presenting problem is the real problem. And in any assault investigation that I've ever been involved in, and I would question whether there was an assault investigation with Roger as a crime victim.
I don't believe there was.
Probably not. Would not be unusual at all. And if it was, it would have been his statement and his responsibility to conduct the investigation. That's the way it is in my world much of the time. But to not ask the question, like, why is that boot print on your head? And why is that swelling and bruise on your jaw? And could there possibly be some internal brain injury? It's just unimaginable to me that in the United States of America, at any emergency room in the country, that somebody wouldn't ask those questions and
It
talk
was a
about those tests.
phenomenal, catastrophic series of events that just stacked on top of each other. It really was. It was catastrophic failure across the board for him.
So, another little aside tip is if you get injured on duty and you think it is, well, first of all, you should always make a report, make that workers' comp report, document it. You know, we walk away from so much, and I'm sure you and Roger have both done that. You know, you twist your knee, you get shoved, you know, let's just, you know, walk it off. But then you get these cumulative injuries in addition to those traumatic things that Roger experienced. And so we don't have a, you know, when we need a knee replacement at age 48 or a hip replacement or back surgery, we can't say, oh yeah, well, those 20 times I got assaulted, but I never filled out a report, or there was never an adequate investigation, or never a doctor visit. So do those things for self-care, and do not hesitate for one moment to call an attorney
Yes.
early in the process. In fact, if you don't have an attorney that you know that you can call, you need to do a little bit of shopping and find it. If you're in law enforcement, you need to have an attorney. I'm not talking about necessarily somebody on retainer, but you need to know who to call at 2 o'clock in the morning when your career and your health and your future is at stake.
And second to that, it should be outside of your agency.
Yes, thank you.
Do not lean on your agency's lawyer because they're there for the agency.
Right, right. So now and there may be some more of the storytelling that needs to take place. But you said how many years to get a workers' comp claim finalized?
It took us 11 years,
And you got a grand total of,
$11,000 and lifetime medical.
but you did get lifetime medical.
He did. The lawyer tried to talk him into selling the lifetime medical because he said that's where your $1 million is at. No, absolutely not. It's going to be a long-term degenerative issue. It will continually get worse. It will never improve. Don't ever sell your medical.
And
But
this
yeah,
is another thing
11
for an
years,
attorney
$11,000.
to consider. Well, we've got workers' comp, so we kind of sign a waiver right to sue. Not necessarily.
No.
Workers' comp covers X things, but that doesn't remove any or all of the liability, particularly if there's negligence involved, of the things that came together to create the injury. So again,
Yes.
just a learning point there. So 11 years of workers' comp.
Mhm.
And a lot of people do not understand. They just take for granted you talked about the PSOB, that's the Federal Public Safety Officer benefit. And I think everybody knows you get, whatever, 400,000 or 600,000 if you die. And I've heard more than one wounded officer say, my family would be so much better off if I had died in the line of duty than have a lifetime debilitating injury.
Roger said it over and over again, and he's said it recently in this last little bit with his mental health. Yeah.
So was there anything that came out of your application for the PSOB?
Well, I mean, he got his grant, and he is catastrophically injured in line of duty. It was a lot of learning process about your legal rights. Again, make sure you get those negative drug tests, even though it may not be a policy. Even if it's positive, get the drug test because you can always have a second opinion run. Get your own lawyer right away. That was definitely one we missed because we trusted the system. They always told us, if you get hurt and injured in line of duty, it's like hitting the jackpot. We'll take care of you. You just go home, enjoy your vacation. And when you medically retire, we'll take care of that too. No. With the PSOB, also, it was a lot of red tape. It takes a long time to get through. So if you're one of those that really does qualify and you need those rights, push, don't give up. It is going to take time, but there's no better benefit. The children are going to have their education, their college paid for in full. And I am told that I qualify for it, but they're working through a waiting list. So one day over the rainbow, my student loans will be paid off because of the injury and his grant that he was given.
How are your kids?
They're terrified. Roger calls me almost every day for a few minutes at a time. When they hear his voice, they shake and they tremble and they walk out of the room. They're scared. This is to raise them. A lot of people aren't used to the dynamic, but Roger was stay-at-home dad. I was the one that was working, and I couldn't tell you what their shoe size was. I didn't know what their teacher's name was. I didn't know where their Cub Scouts meeting was. I had to figure all of that out as a crash course in a matter of days when all of this happened, and I had to become the primary parent and the working parent. He was Mr. Dad. I mean, he was the best dad there was. He did everything. He was there in class with them. He did after school programs with them. They did church. They have a farm they work together on. So, I mean, they were tight. And for them to be terrified of him, they don't want to have anything to do with him. They don't even want to talk to him on the phone. They're scared. It was traumatic, but I have him in counseling. She's an excellent doctor. We're working through things. She's helping them process what's going on, what to expect, and even kind of holding their hand and helping them figure out what they think is right for the situation.
It is so hard to lose a loved one when they change so much, but they're still there.
Yeah.
It's different than the grief of death, but you've still lost so much. And I'm saying that from, an academic perspective. I don't know what that is doing to your heart and your health and your spirit. I can't imagine. I can't imagine.
It's
What do you
crushing.
need? What do you need right now? I'm not offering that I can give anything to you, but what do you need? What does Jennifer need?
I'm going through counseling too.
Good.
I really don't know what I need right now. We're struggling. He has ruined financially. We had savings. We didn't have much. We had a little bit, it's a rainy day. We've already been through tornadoes and everything else like we talked about. But yeah, he ruined me financially. He's maxed out all of my credit cards. And then
that was a TBI related issue. He just didn't have the cognitive presence of mind to manage that, and so you lost all of that.
Yeah, and then he opened credit cards. I think he has 6 lines of credit that I did not know about until after the suicide attempt. I came to the house to clean up and found all these collection letters that he hid from me. So I'm trying to fix those, but they won't talk to me because I'm not on the account. I'm not an authorized user. I'm like, okay, but if you want to get paid, I'm the one with the checkbook. Nope, they won't talk to you.
And that's another complication, and our time's drawn to a close, but and I would caution this particularly for people that are not in a spousal marital relationship. And I'm not trying to make a moral judgment here, but legally, if you've been living together or signed together on a house or something, you don't have the same automatic spousal rights. And now we understand from your situation, just because you're a spouse doesn't mean that you have total access to everything that's going on either.
Yeah,
and I don't know what the solution to that is.
I've been fighting for a power of attorney for years. I've been begging Roger, our kids are older, but we need to do our will. We need to do a living will. We need to do a power of attorney because one day one of us is going to get sick and we're not going to be able to make choices. He refused to sign the power of attorney because this goes to where his brain is, his PTSD and his TBI kind of mesh together. Paranoia. I'm out to get him. I've carried this man for 15 years. I have given him everything he needs. I pay all of his bills. I provide for him. I take care of all of his medical needs. I'm his loud, irritating, annoying, will not take a no voice when medical is not correct. I fight for him every single day, and I'm out to get him. I'm going to set him up for something. And I'm gonna take all of his money and run away and lock him up somewhere. And he refused.
I think that's probably not terribly rare. This sounds extreme in your case because of the combination of the pain and the cognitive issues and the PTSD and the multiple PTSD. But folks that are living with victims of PTSD, which most of the world thinks of as a mental emotional thing, but it is so chemical, biological, physiological.
Yes.
But they often are the caregiver, the soother, the interventionist, and yet also the point of critique and lack of appreciation. It's just that's part of the whole family complex of dealing with PTSD.
Yeah.
And I'm so sorry that you're going through that, and I'm so sorry that the system has failed you so much. I appreciate you being willing to share all of this in a very vulnerable way. Um,
Only
as
because you asked, because it was you. I'm not open, and I keep my story to myself. I really do. So this is way outside of my box.
I know that. I know that. And I ask so that other people can learn from your experience and maybe mitigate theirs a little bit, or at least understand that they're within the realm of they're operating within the realm of normal in that very abnormal world of PTSD, severe
Yeah.
PTSD. And also your story deserves to be told. And if I put a medal around your neck for all that you have done for Roger and your family and your profession, and all the self-care that you've attempted to do, I would certainly do that. It wouldn't be much consolation, but I want you to know that I appreciate you very much.
Oh, and I appreciate you too. You get me
Oh,
through a lot of the really gray and cloudy days. So I lean on you quite a bit.
well, I'm to the extent that I'm, 1,000 miles away, I'm here for you, but you've heard that a lot from a lot of people. And I just hope and pray that people will really step up and help you out on the farm and encourage you every once in a while, let you cry in their bourbon or whatever it is. I know you like to have a salute every once in a while.
I do, yes.
Um, but continue to take care of yourself and your family, which you sound like you're doing a tremendous job continuing to advocate for Roger, even though he's resisting it in a lot of different ways. Very tough
Yeah.
road ahead, but he's very fortunate to have you, and I appreciate
Yeah.
your persistence and dedication, and again to the profession, I appreciate your service.
Thank you. And as far as the message goes, and the takeaway from this is, first of all, be that family, be that thin blue line. Don't let the agency tell you you can't talk to that brother or that sister that's injured, disabled, or killed in the line of duty. Be there for them. Don't let the agency shut the door in their face, because they will. And then also just don't give up. Don't let them tell you no. And I don't know. For the love of God, please get long-term life insurance and disability insurance. I know you guys, most of the people, when they come in, they're 20 years old, they're 10 foot tall and bulletproof. Please pay the extra $3 a month and get that long-term disability insurance, because that's going to save you.
Yeah, good, very practical advice. Well, again, I thank you for your time. We appreciate you very much. Hopefully an article about this will be coming out in the National Police Association website. If you're not familiar with that, I submit a couple of articles a week to that. And if you have any ideas about something you'd like to see on Police One or National Police Association, or um, an idea for a podcast or a Zoom video, again, I don't know what the distribution on this is going to be. We'll post it on the Veterans of War on Our Street site, and please share this as much as you can, because it's a message that needs to be out there and a story that needs to be told. And thank you very much. And I will be praying for you consistently, and for Roger and for you two kids.
Thank you. He definitely needs the prayers. We do too, but he's my main focus right now.
Well, absolutely. And we appreciate that. Well, carry on. Try to take care of yourself.
Always. Have a great night. Thank you
All
for
right.
having me.
My pleasure.
Bye.
Recording.